Good morning. I'd like to call this work session of the Southampton Town Board to order on this 19th day of September 2019. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can remain standing and join with us in a moment of silence. Today we remember Mary Howard, the mother of Paula Godfrey, who works in the council office, and she also leaves behind her son Mark, Paula's brother. Mary passed away last week, and we are terribly sorry for the loss that the family is feeling, and particularly for Paula, who we work with on a daily basis. Our sincerest and deepest condolences to her. Time will heal, but I know, for me, I lost my mom many years ago. She's still with me, and I think about her every day. It's hard to lose a parent, and we wish Paula the best, and we'll be there for her. But let's at this moment join together in silence as we send our thoughts and prayers to her and her family. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you kindly call a roll?
Members of the Town Board, special Town Board meeting Thursday, September 19th, 2019 at 10 a.m. Please be advised that pursuant to Section 62 of Town Law, a special Town Board meeting will be held in the Town Board Meeting Room, Southampton Town Hall, 116 Hampton Road, Southampton, New York, on Thursday, September 19th, 2019 at 10 a.m. for the purpose of considering the following: presentation of the Supervisor's 2020 tentative budget by the Town Clerk to the Town Board pursuant to Town Law 1063. J. Schneiderman, Supervisor, Town of Southampton, dated September 17th, 2019. Supervisor Schneiderman.
Present.
Councilwoman Lofstad.
Here.
Councilwoman Scalera.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier.
Here.
Councilman Scavone.
Present.
All right, thank you. So we'll start with the special meeting, and then we'll go into the work session. So moments ago, I delivered the tentative budget for 2020 to the Town Clerk. One of the roles of supervisor as the Chief Financial Officer for the town is to prepare the budget. So I work closely with Len Marchese, our Controller, and with the department heads and with Deputy Supervisor Zappone in preparing this document. And I'd like to give the board just kind of a brief synopsis of what's in it, and then you will have adequate time to review it. It's actually a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of delivering the budget. So I'll go over to the podium. Frank has prepared a PowerPoint presentation.
Mr. Supervisor, shall I present the budgets before you start?
Sure, would you do that?
Yes,
Madam Clerk?
absolutely.
That way, if you want to not listen to me, but look at the budget, you can is that mine? You can just put it in front of me.
Way better. Thanks.
Most of what I will say is contained in the budget message. That's the first part of the budget. You'll find a several-page message. Some of the highlights from that message will be in this brief presentation. So I'd like to begin with the objectives of the budget. I always strive, this is not my first budget, but to keep costs in line, to not spend more than we need to, because I think it's important that we maintain our low taxes that we enjoy in the area. So what you're seeing and what you will see in this budget is a cost to continue budget. It's not a fancy budget. It's pretty much the town's current operations continuing for another year. So it maintains the level of services that the town provides. In some cases, there are improvements to the level of services. It controls increases in expenditures. It adjusts for declining revenues. And I'll go in more detail in this PowerPoint. And continues investments in infrastructure and remains within the mandated New York State tax levy cap. So there's a 2% tax levy cap, and I've never pierced it. I always try to stay within it, and the town board has not pierced it since I've been here as well. So, that protects the amount of money collected from taxes from going up basically by more than 2%. So this 2020 budget does meet the objectives I just mentioned. It is structurally balanced. We don't, there's no phony projections of, anticipated revenues. It's all quite conservative. It also provides taxpayers with a 6% tax rate reduction. So it's a significant reduction in the town's tax rate. I have delivered a number of budgets in my time here as supervisor and my earlier incarnation as East Hampton Town Supervisor. This is the largest tax rate reduction I have been able to deliver. 6% is a significant reduction in the tax rate. Expenditures, moving on to controlling costs. So there are certain things that there's no escaping from, right? You have certain costs that will be there. We have contractual obligations under our contracts with the police department, under our contracts with the Civil Service Employees Association. With the typical 2% raise and the step increases, that roughly equates to 3%. So, you are seeing a 3% overall increase in spending. It's kind of in line with inflation and cost of living adjustments. It's actually slightly under 3%. It's very difficult to get below that in terms of spending unless you're going to lay off people and reduce the services that you provide, which ultimately will probably lower property values and, increase crime rates and things like that. It's very difficult to say, okay, we're going to eliminate certain services. So we haven't eliminated any services. There's nobody being laid off or fired in this budget. It's basically meeting the contractual obligations. There are three new positions. One is in the CPF department. It's an environmental analyst that helps us determine which properties are the best ones to acquire, helps us with our invasive species mitigation and other environmental programs, helps with the water quality programs that we're heavily engaged in. That is paid with the CPF revenues. It's not the general fund tax. It's money from land transfers. And then the Parks Department, the use of our facilities has been skyrocketing. Major increases, particularly the Ponquag Beach Pavilion, which is, way up in terms of the revenue it's producing and the use of that facility. So we are adding one additional recreation director and one parks maintenance personnel. They are paid for easily within the increased revenues that we're seeing in the Parks Department. So there's no tax levy implications to adding these two positions. We have to do it. We have to provide Kristen, who's here, Kristen Doulos, who is our Parks Director and doing a phenomenal job over there, needs this additional staff. I'm, very reluctant to add additional staff unless I really feel it's warranted. And in the case of the Parks Department, I felt it clearly was. So let's move on to the next slide, controlling costs. Taxes is our main source of revenue. 30% of the town's revenues come in from other sources, and we have an issue. As I said, we try to conservatively budget what revenues are. Mortgage taxes are often related to the real estate market. There was a dip below what we had seen in the past. So we have adjusted our projections for next year to a lower amount of mortgage tax revenues. In waste management, this was always kind of it funded itself. That operation was self-sustaining. We charge people for the green bags and the non-recyclables that they bring to our transfer stations. But if they want to bring us recyclables, we don't charge them anything, and they can bring us their paper and their glass, their containers, cardboard, etc. And the revenues, we would actually sell that material. And, you know, some of it we break even, but other, like particularly the metals and the cardboard, they were pretty profitable enough to run this operation so that we didn't have to charge the people bringing us recyclables anything. And we certainly want to encourage recycling. It's something that I think we all believe in, to reuse materials and to recycle materials. But China stopped taking these and the entire market collapsed. And now we are paying to get rid of recyclables. Not as much as we paid to get rid of the MSW, municipal solid waste, but we are paying significantly to the point we had close to $1 million shortfall in that fund. And I have to make that up, and we're going to have conversations during the year as to what we do about it. Meanwhile, from the budget model, assuming that the town doesn't want to close the recycling centers, I have to bring in $1 million into that operation to be able to meet the operational costs. And then Justice Court revenues have declined for whatever reason. We have seen a reduction in crime, but I think in terms of the amount of people going through our Justice Court, we are seeing less fines from that Justice Court operation. It's a significant reduction, and that's reflected in the budget too. So when you have large shortfalls in revenues and your expenses are going up slightly, you have to figure out where that money is coming from. Do you increase fees? Do you increase taxes? Now we're fortunate in a sense that our valuation from new construction grew the town by about 3%. So, you know, new homes, new garages, new pools, additions, and things like that. So we did have a growing tax base, properties coming onto the tax rolls, paying higher amounts of money. That 3% from the growth in the assessment base takes care of the 3% in the increasing expenditures. So continuing on in terms of tax stabilization, we've talked about this as a board quite a bit. The town of Southampton is one of only 2 towns on Long Island that does a market trend valuation changes. Every year we look at the actual value of everybody's properties, and we try to reflect in our property record cards what we believe is the true value so that everybody is paying their proportional fair share of taxes. It's something that was put in place, I think, in the mid-2000s and has been in place ever since, though we have seen in certain instances where property values in some neighborhoods go up faster than others. Now, we're fortunate in the sense that the last few years, for the first time, we have seen increases in property values everywhere. Flanders, Riverside, Hampton Bays, East Quad. You know, there were years when property values were going down and people were saying, oh, we're seeing property values east of the canal go up every year, but ours haven't. What's going on? And now we are seeing improvements. But of course, that alarms people when they see their property value increase in our records. What will happen to their taxes? And we are looking at this. As you know, we've put a freeze in place. So for the next 2 years, we will not adjust property values upward, down if they go down, but we won't adjust them upward at all while we evaluate our system and see if we can create some protections for people on fixed incomes or modest incomes that won't be able to adjust for a higher actual taxes. So we're looking at that. We've sent a letter to Assemblyman Thiel and Senator Laval looking for something similar to the New York State property tax cap, a cap on upward adjustments at 2% and no greater. So, we're hopeful that we'll get some relief there, and we're putting together a great committee now to evaluate our assessment procedures and make some recommendations. For the average taxpayer, for the market trend component was roughly, on average, a 6% adjustment, and it came out of the assessor's office looked at the cost of construction. Cost of construction has been going up, and they use a formula, a cost table for construction, and new numbers were plugged in based on changes in the marketplace, and that led to not necessarily the land value going up, but the physical building going up. And on average, these market trend changes were around 6%. So the 6% reduction in the tax rate for the average homeowner will eliminate any actual increase in what they pay in taxes next year. For the average person, should wipe that out, and they should pay roughly the same. If their property assessment went up by less than 6%, they're going to see a tax decrease. If it went up by more than 6%, they might see a slight increase. So, Frank, we'll go on to the next one, improving services. I mentioned the 3 new positions, spoke a little bit about that. We are also investing in law enforcement and public safety. This stat is remarkable. It does change because we have, it's relatively a small town. Major crimes over a 2-year period are down by 47%. There is crime rates are down across the country. They tend to relate to the economy. When the economy is strong, you do see reductions in crime rates, but not by 47%, almost nearly 50%. Half the major crimes that were occurring 2 years ago are occurring today. That's significant, and I have to give a lot of credit to our police department, who do a remarkable job under the leadership of Chief Skrnicki. We are also in our public safety enforcement, our code enforcement, we have seen a major increase in terms of enforcement actions on housing code violations and other violations. A 22% increase in enforcement actions. And this budget does continue to provide the same level of support to community groups. Some of them are doing really important work on addiction issues or working with youth, working with veterans, mental health programs. So there's no reduction in this budget in terms of what we provide to the various NGOs, various not-for-profits that are assisting in making our community a great place to live. I want to go on to infrastructure. So it's really critical to maintain your infrastructure. You've probably heard me say before, if you don't fix the leaky roof, you end up having to replace the whole building. So I believe in maintaining infrastructure. Sometimes improving infrastructure, like we did at Ponquag Beach Pavilion. And you saw the revenues coming in are significant from Ponquag Beach, which shows that that's sort of paying for itself as well. But I'd like to talk a little bit about what's proposed in this budget in terms of infrastructure. So we decided that we would acquire the Hampton Bays Community Center. We have been leasing it, not at a low number. The lease has been quite expensive, and we've been leasing the 9,000 square feet there. We had an option to acquire that facility, not just the senior center, but that entire building, which includes what was formerly a church to the south of it, an additional 4,000 square feet. It turns out, although the number for acquiring it is a high number, somewhere in that $8-9 million range, it turns out that the debt service is roughly equivalent to what we were paying to lease it. And we pick up an extra 4,000 square feet. So from a financial decision, it's a pretty good one, as long as you can use the extra 4,000 square feet. And we are going to put it to very good use, because we're going to move our entire public safety department, ordinance enforcement, et cetera, to Hampton Bays. We're going to center it there in the Hampton Bays community. We'll have full-time staff there working on ordinance enforcement, as well as fire marshal, as well as the other functions like animal control will all be in that space next to our senior center. And we'll have a meeting room there too, so we'll be able to maybe relieve some of the pressure here, but we'll have a meeting that we can maybe do some hearings, maybe licensing review board or Public Safety Commission can have some meetings in a room like that. Those people who are challenging their false alarm fees and things like that could occur right there. Okay, so that's the Hampton Bays Community Center. The Hampton Bays Water District, as you know, we run a utility. It's the only utility that we run. Everywhere in the town of Southampton is served either by Suffolk County Water Authority or by private wells for their water. In Hampton Bays, we provide the water through the Hampton Bays Water District. The infrastructure there has not been maintained to the proper level, and certain work needs to be done. This isn't just what I think. This is what the Hampton Bays Water District managers believe. This is what our consulting engineers believe, what our independent engineers reviewing it believe, that there are two projects in particular that have to get done, which is the tank rehabilitation at Field 4 and the iron and manganese filtration at Field 4. They should have been done a long time ago, a decade or more in some cases, and they just have to get done. So we're biting the bullet. I have it in the capital program. It'll probably, whether they can be done for next season or not, I don't know. They have to be engineered. It might be the following season that this work actually occurs. We're going to do our best to expedite these things, but that cost is borne by the Hampton Bays Water District, and there is a proposed rate increase of 10% in terms of what they pay for water. And the property tax rate is proposed not with a 6% reduction, but relatively flat in the Hampton Bays Water District. The last project is another public safety project. Also, I believe, and I think the board shares my belief, that it needs to occur. The Southampton Ambulance Department has come to us requesting a new ambulance barn, providing property that they have to construct a new ambulance barn. Their facility no longer can meet their needs, and we have already agreed to do this, and so I'm just moving it forward in the budget. It's roughly a $3 million ambulance facility, and that is reflected. That cost is borne by the property owners in that district. So it's not the whole town, but just those property owners in that district, and it's already been factored into the budget model. Lastly, on water quality, we have engaged in $8.5 million in large-scale water quality projects. This is out of the CPF Water Quality Fund. There's no general fund property tax commitment for this. This is all coming out of the CPF fund, which is the 2% transfer tax. And we have now 136 residential wastewater treatment systems either installed or getting installed. So these are those IA systems. I know, John, this is something that you've played a leadership role in terms of mandating these systems and providing grant relief for homeowners, and I know we've talked about increasing those mandates, and I suspect that we will. But this is, I think, an important step in reducing nitrogen in our bays and harbors and restoring those bodies to proper health. I'm looking for my last page here. Frank, do you have the last page? I have up through page 4. Oh, is that the last one? All right, the problem is it's hard for me to read that screen. So, thank you, Frank. So in closing, let me just reiterate that this budget is structurally balanced. It protects town's strong record of fiscal soundness. I remind you that we have a AAA credit rating by both Standard & Poor's and by Moody's, and We just recently received a flawless audit of our town finances. It provides sound fiscal guidance for 2020. Now begins the process of input from the town board and from the community. And by November 20th, that's the deadline for adoption of the budget. This budget is actually early. It's a week or two early, and I thank our controller for making that happen, for expediting this. Thank you, Len Marchese, and to your staff. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a complex town with a lot of various functions, and I think Len has done a tremendous job. I want to thank all the department heads. I see several of you here. We have our CPF manager here, Lisa Combrink, Sandra Cirizione, our human resources director. We have our clerk, our tax receiver here, Teresa Kiernan, as I mentioned before. We have our Parks Department head, Kristen Doulos, our Housing and Community Development Director, Diana Weir. So thank you for attending. Frank, thank you for your work in putting this budget together. And board, I look forward to your comments and any questions that you'll have for me. Thank you.
And it's a little lighter than
Okay. Yeah, because we're in a special meeting. All right, so
On the agenda.
because it's a special meeting, we do have a public portion. I don't have any cards. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard? Mr. Robbins?
You want me to turn this around or just leave it?
Yeah, let's turn it a little bit, because you should be addressing the board.
Yeah, my name is Greg Robbins. Thank you for getting it right. I'm the Republican candidate for town supervisor. I just had one quick question. Can you tell me what the amount of the assessed evaluation went up in this particular budget?
So the assessed valuation doesn't go up in the budget.
No, but it's
So-
an ingredient in the budget, if you will.
Sure, so the full valuation of the town of Southampton went up by roughly 9%. Of that, 3% was from new construction, and 6% from market trend, from just because the real estate market increased. That's why I said the 6% reduction in the tax rate should offset that for the average person. And
But in essence, it went up 9%.
the value of the town, yes,
Okay,
yes, the full valuation.
thank you very much.
Yes. Right, so if you say there's 3% and 6% adds up to the 9%. Okay, anyone else in public portion? Okay, motion to close public portion,
second.
seconded by Councilman Bouvier, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so, Madam Clerk, do I need to close the special meeting and go into work session?
sir.
Work session, yes?
Yes.
All right, so I'll make a motion to adjourn our special meeting.
Before we adjourn, I just want to thank the supervisor and the controller's office for the extra week to review the budget. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Government is early.
All right, so there's a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. This-